Now looking back once again, over those 30 years, what was the greatest setback you had and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, the honest answer, you have setbacks every day. I mean, disappointments every day, and the key is to have more positives than negatives, or more good things happen than bad things happen. And inevitably, with 178,000 people in 111 countries, you're going to have things that go wrong. But clearly, over the 30 years, it was the near-death experience that some people call it in 1991, 92, when I have to take responsibility, over-leveraged the company after the acquisition of Ogilvy. We thought the world's economy was going to be stronger in 91 too, and that we would ride through it. The actual technical mistake I made was that we had a convertible preferred stock, which converted into equity if the share price rose, and of course in a recession share prices fall, which means the convert stayed a preferred, and it was very expensive debt. Effectively, it was actually 7% net, but you didn't get a tax deduction, so it was 11% gross costing debt, which at that time, well, even today, would be phenomenally expensive. So that was the mistake. I overgeared the company, probably eyes bigger than tummy, as we've seen in some other occasions with other people. But no, I don't think it was eyes bigger than tummy. I think it was a great deal, and Ogilvy has proven to be a great deal, but it was financially structured wrongly. There was too much leverage in there. And the answer, how do we cope with it? It's the tough stuff that you have to deal with that really tests you out. It's easy if things are going well. That's easy to manage, as you know. The tougher stuff is when things go wrong, and how you react to things going wrong, and how you deal with the failures or the mistakes or the difficult patches. And I think that was the biggest test. And I didn't throw the towel in, or some people I'm sure would have liked me to have thrown the towel in. I said, I got us into this mess. I have to take responsibility. So let's work our way through it. Now we have some natural advantages in our business if you have large amounts of debt, in that we don't have big fixed assets. We depend on people. So the financiers tend to look at businesses like ours and attribute a lot of importance to the human, and quite rightly, the human capital and the talent, and therefore these are quite sort of fragile flowers in some respects. I think they're more institutional than people quite understand. JWT is 150 years old as of December the 7th of last year. So I think there's too much emphasis on the fragility, but I stuck at it. The institutions were supportive, the banks were supportive. We didn't miss payments. We rescheduled our debt, and then we did a debt for equity swap, and we fought our way out of the paper bag. And in the 90s, we grew organically. We did some acquisitions, but we grew organically. We actually disposed of one or two things to reduce debt. And then we continued to grow, and in 2000, we really came back into the front line of deal making with our acquisition of Young and Rubicam, of Y&R Group, which has proven to be a good deal too. So I think that was the biggest test. But the biggest test really underlying it is that when you get these setbacks, which you get all the time, it's not just 91 to 2, that the way you deal with them is you immerse yourself further. You don't run away.
You fight through it. You don't
give
up.
Have to. Yeah, it's the big test. Yeah. It's the big test. So persistence and commitment is really important.
Now, did you have a mentor?
My dad would be my mentor. So he died in 1989, just after we did the Ogilvy acquisition. So he saw the first 4 years. I mean, he saw the two biggest things we've done, but not in quantum, but in terms of relative impact. JWT was 13 times our size. Ogilvy, I think, was twice our size. So he was and I used to speak to him, I would say at least 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, irrespective. I mean, if he was alive today and I was at CES, but I guarantee you I would have been speaking to him, and that was the days before mobile phones and iPhones and everything else. I would speak to him 3 or 4 times a day about the business, because he was a very good person to talk to, who only had my agenda at heart, not anybody else's. And of course, that's very difficult to find. Now, when my dad died, I had a lawyer here called Phil Rees, who was the senior partner of Davis & Gilbert, quite a well-known advertising firm, who was very helpful to me with the acquisition of JWT, of Ogilvy, and others. He sadly died also of cancer in the early part of the millennium, just after 2000. But Phil didn't really replace my father. Nobody could ever do that. He was certainly, my father was my closest friend ever. But he was a near substitute. Since Phil died, really, I haven't had anybody who I could really turn to in quite the same way. And I think it's very important to have that. I mean, it's very important to be able to talk to somebody who is dispassionate about what you're talking about, who has no axe to grind, a hidden agenda, or even, you know, an open agenda, and that you can talk to openly about the challenges and the opportunities and can give you some impartial advice. My father was not knowledgeable about the business. Phil was very knowledgeable about the business, and therefore my father, in a way, was even more neutral, but was even more dispassionate about me. I mean, his interests were really my interests.